Running is a great way to stay healthy, push your limits, and grow. There's so much freedom in running, just taking your shoes, going out there. But running can also be difficult, especially when you're starting. So today I want to share with you the best tip I know to help you improve as a runner. And that's going to be helpful regardless of your level, regardless of your goals. If you're aiming for your first 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, ultra marathon, or maybe it's just to stay healthy, run faster, run longer, this will help you enjoy running and improving. Hi, Simon here. Welcome to my channel. I'm an ultra runner on my road to racing 100 mile, and we're halfway there. On this channel, I share my journey reaching this ambitious goal, but more importantly, the goal of this channel is to inspire you and provide you the tools to go out there and have your own adventure. I'm making a lot of tip video from the experience I've gained racing these races so that you don't have to learn the hard way these lessons. And today we go pretty basic. What is the simplest, the best, most important tips that there is to improve as a runner? Now I said simple, I did not say easy, and that is where it's very difficult, but that's also one of the things that I love about running. You have to put in the work. There are no shortcuts. There are detours, but there is no shortcut. You'll have to put in the work, but there are ways to help you put in the work and put in the right work so that you improve as a runner and you can reach these amazing goals. So instead of just telling you a simple trick that you cannot implement, like run every day or these sorts of things, I want to also give you practical advice on how to reach that. I also want to give you my tips to make it more practical. It's not just theoretical. You need to actually put in the work. And how can you put in the work when we're not professional runner, when running is just a hobby, when sometimes we don't feel like it, when sometimes it's painful, when sometimes we have setbacks. And these are practical tips that will work in real life setting. And the most important thing, you cannot avoid it, but improving as a runner will take time and it will take effort. You will need to be consistent in your training, you will need to be disciplined, and you will need to resist the temptation of trying to take some shortcuts. Shortcuts in running are usually actually detour or at least risky behavior that could stop you in your track where you're making good progress and you just want to go a little bit faster. You'll have to put in the time, you'll have to put in the work. And although you might be very motivated right now, your motivation will fluctuate. Sometimes you're very happy, very excited to go out there, but sometimes the motivation is gone. And that's where discipline kicks in, and that's where consistency is extremely important. You're not just doing it because you feel like it, you're doing it because you have a long-term goal that you want to achieve, and you understand that to achieve that, sometimes it's gonna suck balls. And the first thing here that will help you a lot is that having an abstract goal that is long-term, it's difficult on a day-to-day basis, hour-to-hour basis to always make the right decision. And I think something that helps me a lot is to write it down. Write down what my goal is and then write down what I need to do to get there. If you have an actual calendar with an actual pen and you can cross the workout you did or write it down, we're in a digital era and I'm as connected as everyone, but there's something to be said about doing it with an analog pen, doing it for real. There's something satisfying, there's something a little bit more real to it, and for me at least, it makes a big difference. Writing down my plan, crossing it, or writing the time I did, huge factor to help me stay consistent day in and day out. And what's great about it also is that you can look back. You can look back at everything you've already done. And at some point when you're far in your training, that's where you're gonna struggle. You're 2, 3, 4 months in. You just don't really feel like it. You don't see the progress anymore. But now you can look back. You have this calendar, everything you've done, the things you've done 3 months ago, that run, that 5K that you were so proud of. And now it feels like a just normal training run. And being able to look at this, look back at the progress and the journey you've already made will help you stay focused on the long-term goal and think, wow, I did a lot already. So you just need to put the hard work. That's simple, right? Well, that's the thing. It's not that simple. It's not the harder you work, the better the result. I'm not saying hard work is not important, but at some level, hard work is kind of a given. If you're gonna race a 100-mile ultramarathon, you are training hard. Everyone is training hard. Pro are all training hard. What will make the difference between mediocrity and excellence is not just about putting in the work. Of course, you're putting in the work, but now you have to be smart about it. So training smarter doesn't mean that you're not training harder. Yeah, of course you're training hard, but make it count. Make your time count, make your effort count. And what do I even mean about training smart? What does that mean? Training smart first is understanding that volume and intensity is not everything in your training. There are good workouts, there are bad workouts, there are workouts in the middle. You have a finite amount of time that you can dedicate to training, to running, and you have a finite amount of energy too. These are resources. And of course, if you train 12 hours, that's probably better than training for 4 hours. But if you're training 12 hours, not every 12 hours is the same. And training smart is using these resources, allocating that smartly so that you get the best benefit for your effort. And basically it comes down to understanding what's helpful, what is not helpful, what is risky, what is not risky, what is a good ramping up, for example. And once you understand that, it's about implementing that. It's about making the most out of what you have. If I tell you someone is training 100 miles every week and someone else is training 70 miles every week, which one will finish faster a race? Obviously, you cannot answer that. 100 mile might include a lot of junk mile, and junk miles are a thing. I'm guilty of that sometimes. It's just adding mile in your training schedule that are really more like filler. You were aiming for 70 miles and you have 6 miles that are missing. I'll do a 6 mile run, like slow run, and I'll just include that and I'll skip the rest. It's not productive training. Maybe it's better than nothing, maybe not, but you could have structured it differently so that at the same amount of time, same amount of effort, you would actually benefit from that. These would not just to put a number on the calendar to say that you reach a 70 miles or 100 mile, but rather this is a key element in your training. And I want to help you do that. I want to help you understand what is helpful, what is not helpful to help you reach your goal. And the first step to that is understanding what are the elements that you need to have in your training. Sure, it is important to understand what is your weekly mileage. That's one of the most important things. That's why we always talk about it, but it's not everything. Time on your feet will be important too, including some zone 2 training, back-to-back long run, but also some speed workouts, some hill training. You also want to not overly focus on running itself, but also having some strength session, potentially some mobility exercise. You should also work on preparing your gear, also training fueling. These things seem small in comparison to running 100 miles per week. But if you're better at fueling and you just train 50 miles per week, you're actually going to get the great results for your race. And that is my simplest trick. That is the most important tip that you can have to improve as a runner, and it's to have a structure in your training. You don't just do whatever you want, whenever you want. You have a structure and you follow it. And I think there's really two main ways to have structure in your training. The first one is the more traditional one. It's having a training plan, a calendar with all of your workout for several months in advance. The other one is the one that I'm using more myself, especially recently, and that's partly why I'm sharing my vlog on what I do on a day-to-day basis. And I would call that more the flex approach. I still have a structure, I still make sure to include key elements, but I don't necessarily have a calendar that goes 6 months in advance. So let's dive into why you should go with one or the other and how you can actually create that for yourself to become a better runner. The key reason why you want structure in your training is first to make sure that you don't forget key elements, because we as humans have a tendency to do what we want to do and what we enjoy doing. And if I did not have a structure myself, I would always skip strength training and I would probably skip a lot of my interval session because these are things that I don't necessarily enjoy. But having a structure helps me remember that these are actually pretty important things to do. The other reason to have a structure is that having structure will help you be disciplined because you're creating expectation for yourself. You're creating accountability as to what you're supposed to be doing, regardless of if you feel like it or not. So now let's talk about the two structured that you can have. And the first one is the traditional one. I have a full video on about how to make a training plan. The training plan has a lot of key advantages, but what is it exactly? A training plan: print yourself a nice calendar, sign up for a race in 6 months, 1 year, or whatever, have a very concrete goal. Whatever it is, have a long-term goal that you can put at the end of that calendar. And now you look at the different weeks that you have and you will break it down. You will reverse engineer, how do I reach that goal? And the training plan is long-time planning that will include daily activities and weekly activities that will help you keep on track and keep track of progress. There's a lot of free training plan that you can have online. The video that I have posted myself, as I mentioned before, actually teaches you a little bit more how to create it yourself, but very high level because this is not the goal of this video. What do you have in your training plan? You will have all of the key elements, all of the key workout, but also rest that you will include to reach that goal. And that means that you'll need to think about, how do I ramp up gradually to reach that goal? If, again, we go back to running your first 5K, how long can you run right now without having to walk? And we'll start with some run-walk cycle of a certain amount of time or a certain distance. We'll start at week 1, and then at week 17, we want to be at a certain amount of total distance per week. And we're going to gradually go towards that. Every week, we make a small increase in the distance that we're doing. We're walking a little bit less. And by making that slow progress, you're reducing the risk of injury. So I think what's great about a training plan or a training calendar is the really long-term forecasting, knowing that you're on track to reach that goal and being able to track how you're doing compared to your own goals. I think there's also a certain level of simplicity to it. You might say that every week on Sunday is your long run. Every week on Wednesday is your speed workout. And then it's very easy to kind of go down from there. And finally, although the training plan or the training calendar is probably the most intimidating, I think it's also the most beginner friendly. That's the one that you're told a little bit more where to go and you just have to go there, which is easier said than done. But you don't have to adjust it as much as you go, because the training plan, if it was created smartly, of course you should always adapt to how your body is doing and these sorts of things. But there's a little bit less of making decision on the fly, and rather you have to execute on that. So I think it's fairly beginner friendly. And again, there's so many guides online on how to make them that you can have something that has worked for a lot of other people. You might be different, but it's a good place to start, and you will gain experience from that. And eventually you can move to what I do myself, which is a little bit more of a flex approach. And what's the flex approach? The flex approach is that instead of having 6 months planning ahead of time, you still work with a structure. I really advise that you have a structure, that you have some guidance as to what you'll be doing, but the forecasting is not as far ahead. And that's something that I would mostly recommend for someone who has experience and is already at more or less the level that they want, for example, weekly mileage. And then you might do some fine tuning, like increasing speed, increasing your pace, or these sorts of things on a weekly basis, but you're already there. So the risk of injury is maybe not as high, and the adjustment that you need to make is not the decision of how many miles should I run for my long run. This is something that you already know for yourself. You know your body pretty well. You know what you can tolerate and what is a good workout. And what you do is that you plan short term. And for me, short term means a training block. And in my video about making a training calendar, I have these training blocks. Usually they are 3 weeks training block followed by 1 week of rest. And that's how far ahead I will go myself, sometimes even less than that. And I will think, for this structure, for this block, what is my goal? Weekly mileage. Okay, it's 65 miles a week. This is how I'm going to structure any single one of these weeks. And then I'll say, I want to have back-to-back long runs in the weekend, maybe 13 miles, 26 miles. These are just very specific example. But this is the level of guidance that I will have. I'm not necessarily saying Sundays I will be doing my long runs necessarily. And I will also hold myself accountable to these things. So every week I will write down all of the training that I want to include in that week. So I'll have a bullet list of that, and it'll be a 30-minute strength session. I will have a 8 times 2-minute interval session. I'll have an 8-mile tempo run. And when I go through the week, I will cross these. Whichever days feels like it's the best one to do that, when I feel that my body is in good condition to do an interval, I'll do the interval. If I'm feeling a little bit achy, maybe I'm a little bit sore, then I will just not do the interval. And oh, it so happened that in my list, I have a rest day. So today I'm taking the rest day. And the advantage of having a flex approach like that is obvious that it's adding flexibility to the training that you're doing. You still have a structure, you still have elements that you need to include in there on a weekly basis, but it doesn't necessarily tell you when to do it. And even sometimes for me, I might just say interval session. And based on how I feel on the day that I want to do my interval session, maybe I feel that 1-minute interval going balls to the walls is a good idea. But maybe I feel like, there's a risk of injury when I go that fast. So instead of doing these short intervals, these high bursts of energy, I might do half miles intervals. So I'm really fine tuning to how my body is doing, but also just to life in general. Life in general can be messy sometimes. You can adapt to it, but you still have a structure and a guidance. Instead of just saying, I feel like doing an interval, you know that you have to do an interval this week. But the key disadvantage to this approach, it's pretty obvious. One is that you really have to know yourself and be very honest about it. The second one is that you have to be pretty self-disciplined about it, because otherwise it can be easy to just always postpone these workouts during the week. And let's say you have 2 rest days. Well, you take your rest day on Monday and then you take it on Tuesday, and then you're kind of screwed. And then Friday you feel that doing back to back to back to back hard workout is just not feasible. And the reason it's not feasible is that you had included these rest days, but instead of spreading them around, you took them all out at the beginning. So you really need to be experienced doing that. But I would say that once you reach a certain level, and you will know it for yourself, I think it's a good transition. I think it's something that is good to try. And then be honest with yourself. Are you actually training as hard when you don't have a calendar per se, or not? And if you really need a calendar, you go back to it right away, no problem. And that's it, folks. These are my tips to improve as a runner, which is mostly have a structure to your training. Make sure to include all of the key elements, because of course you need to work hard. That's kind of a given. But working hard doesn't exclude that you should also be working smart. The best outcome that you will have in running, but that's also true in life, is that you're working hard, you're diligent about it, but you're also smart about how you're approaching things. And having this structure will help you be smart. You have time to think about it, to plan ahead of time, and then be disciplined and execute. You can either have a training plan, which is what I would recommend when you're starting, and once you have a lot of experience, you can move to a flex training approach, where you make sure to have a list or have some level of accountability as to what are the elements that you want on a weekly basis, but you don't necessarily need to plan 6 months in advance. I hope these tips were helpful. I understand it's a little bit vague and it's pointing to other video, but this is really what has helped me be so successful as a runner. Being able to run 4,900 miler in the past, 4 years, stay injury free, but at the same time having decent performance. It's about having a structure to my training, but a flex approach. Understanding what is risky, what is not risky, what is helpful, what is not helpful, and implementing that. So as always, thanks for watching. If you appreciate this video, please leave a thumbs up, comment below, share with your friends. I don't know exactly when I'm gonna post that, but assuming it's close to the holiday, wishing you all happy holiday. New Year very soon. I have some very, very cool adventure that I'm planning that I'm very eager to share with you. So stay tuned, subscribe to my channel, and in the meantime, see you next time.